Hi there. The Church of Nowhere and the Church of Nothing on metaphysics. Well, as you know, these two churches don't have any view on metaphysics. They don't believe in any metaphysical reality, which basically means there's no gods and goddesses and heavens and hells and demons and angels and things that go bump in the night, including no UFOs either. Uh, in case you're thinking it's sort of Realian based. It isn't. Apart from the moral dimension of the Church of Nowhere and the emphasis on meditation, which we'll come to in a minute, there is a strict sort of taboo on discussion of metaphysics. Although I can quite see that words like God and soul would possibly simply be symbolic nouns, as it were, that point to something very special. So, you might say that morality is God, since morality is very, very very much emphasized by the Church of Nowhere. And, you've got to have a sort of special place for morality and for moral philosophy and for talking about moral issues and ethical lifestyles and how to initiate ethical lifestyles and maintain them in the face of ethical dilemmas, which crop up because we live in a world of necessity where moral dilemmas occur. And the other thing is that you might talk about soul as well, I suppose, and soul would just refer to the uniqueness of every sentient being as an individual. So we're talking about the individual rights of animals, of individual animals, for example, as well as humans. And so that's another thing. So you might talk about soul, but all this is symbolic language. There aren't any souls knocking around in the brain. And at death, it's the end of consciousness as we know it, or in fact, there is only one consciousness as we know it now, and upon death, that consciousness dissolves. And if you look at the history of religion, religion is like tens of thousands of years old. And it's always been concerned with death. And because society has looked at death as an extremely negative thing, obviously it is, empirically. But it can also be looked at as a positive thing. You die for a greater cause, for example, and then you're rewarded after death by going to some kind of soldier's paradise. So it's worth dying for the community as a soldier because you will be rewarded for defending your society against attack. And then, of course, childbirth is another thing that's always concerned religions, because childbirth is such a dangerous transition. I mean, to get we nowadays, well, in the West, we don't have any idea of this really. But even, 150 years ago, women could get pregnant about 18 times or something and only have 2 children survive out of those 18 pregnancies. So that's a lot of grief to deal with. And that's a lot of grief and fear, because out of your 18 pregnancies, you have no idea whether your children are going to survive beyond the age of 5, for example. And so therefore you're in fear over that, and you're in grief most of the time over the children that you've lost. And some people, say, well, they didn't mind really, they're pretty tough, yeah, right, okay. You can believe that if you like. But I'm sure that losing a child, even one child out of 18 pregnancies, is a terrible thing. And it hasn't happened to you yet, or maybe it never happened to you, hopefully. So you've no idea what you're talking about when you say, oh, well, they were tough enough to withstand that, weren't they? Like, they were used to it. What are you complaining about, like, But also religion, of course, taught people to accept things more. and not to complain about things, I suppose. So the stiff upper lip kind of thing was part of any religious code, and to deal with death on any level was part of what religion was about. So metaphysics grew because religion has to sort of, well, I mean, death is kind of the medicine, and religion is a spoonful of sugar that makes the medicine go down. So we look at the reality of death, and we conclude almost that there must be something more meaningful to death than just extinction, or obliteration or annihilation. There must be something more that's going on. There's something, at least there must be some meaning to death, and there must be some reward for giving your life in sacrifice for your community. And of course, the other thing that religion's been concerned with is lineage. Lineage is very important as well, because that's all about, preserving the DNA pool and expanding the DNA pool so you don't get autism and you don't get mental and physical handicap resulting from unions between, brothers and sisters and cousins and things like that. So so that that's also been very important in religion, is to establish lineage and to witness the continuation of lineage and the management of lineage, especially within the ruling classes of any particular community. Where it's important to maintain a good DNA stock, if you like. I come from Hardy's stock, as the film says. Anyway, be that as it may, the point is, if you don't have a metaphysics, then you are left with with having to face death as extinction and annihilation. And we have a sort of thing inside us. Some people call it the ego, which basically is our sort of sense of self-preservation, a sense of grasping, if you like. We grasp onto things. We grasp onto hope itself, I suppose, really. And in the face of what seems like hopelessness or meaninglessness, we sort of grasp onto various things, and various ideas and concepts and things that we imagine to be true, which don't necessarily prove to be true or cannot be proved to be true in some sense. And people, of course, will say to me, "Oh, well, you can't prove a negative, you see. So that's why you can't disprove there's a God or whatever." Well, no, you certainly can't. But one of the things about the Church of Nowhere, if it doesn't have any metaphysics, it is left with the stark reality of death, and the fact that in death, you have to let go of who you are and what you want, and who you love and who you don't love. Same with pain. I mean, a considerable amount of pain makes you let go. And some people say that you have to sort of breathe through the pain and let go of your perception of pain. Similarly, you have to sort of let go of death, I suppose. As you're dying, you have to let go of life itself and your perception of life. And you let go of things that seem to you to be important, because they're only important to somebody who is alive, and you are dying. You are becoming extinct. You are becoming annihilated by death. So part of what the Church of Nowhere also advocates is meditation. And one of the things about meditation is of letting go, even letting go of letting go. But that's a little bit more sort of an advanced discussion. But certainly, you have a train of consciousness, like your thoughts come and go, and you have to let them go. And you have to let the fact that you're thinking, you have to let that go as well. So that you become, sort of, you develop a consciousness of matter. I mean, if you imagine a stone, for example, which has some sort of consciousness, it's probably just conscious of itself being a stone. It can't think about anything else other than its stoneness. So, and many sort of, this actually doesn't make much sense at all, unless, of course, you've been on psilocybin or THC or LSD or something like that, which some church members also advocate being on. And you should definitely go on a psilocybin trip, for example, magic mushrooms being the source of psilocybin. peyote and LSD and other mind-altering drugs, where the mind, obviously, where the brain is actually poisoned. Let's face it, by the THC, or the LSD, or the psilocybin, and you're actually looking at your own death or experiencing death, senility, the brain actually dysfunctioning, the brain collapsing, the cortex dysfunctioning, neuro pathways disintegrating. And the only way to cope with all this, of course, is to simply let go, and just objectively, or even, well, without criticism or judgment or fear or anything like that, you just let it all go. You let all these you let your brain disintegrate, as it were. You let your thinking become dysfunctional. Because I can tell you that if you try an attempt to grasp onto some thought, and hold it close to you, you will go into fear, you will go into paranoia, you will go into disassociation, and you will have what they call a bummer trip, which means it is nasty. I can tell you that, and it seems to never end as well. It seems you enter into a world of pain, which never seems to stop, and which you really don't know how to stop. And the only way to stop this paranoia and creeping chaos and awareness that you're dying is just simply to let go. So if we're going to look at meditation, we'd have to look at it in terms of the ability to let go of one's consciousness and to let go of one's thoughts, and not to pick up on any one of our thoughts, and go with it. You simply have to go without it. You have to keep shedding your thoughts as they rise up, until you reach a sort of kind of a plateau of consciousness where you've almost really where you flatline. Your heart stops. It's almost like a heart stopping, where your brain stops, but and yet you're still conscious, and still in control, because you could come out of the meditation. But you sort of need to practice this letting go, because in the final analysis, that's what you've got to do at the end of life, is to let go of life, and to let go of your aspirations and your ambitions, and to let go of your avarice even, and your joie de vivre, your thirst for experience and for life and for pleasure and all that kind of stuff. You have to let go of all that. As indeed you have to let go of it, I suppose, as you go into old age. I mean, your libido goes down, and you have to let go of the possibility of having intense sexual experiences, because you're no longer physiologically able to sort of deliver on those sexual experiences. You're not going to have the same experience from sexual intercourse as you did before when you were young. So there's a lot of things we have to let go of. And I noticed that one of the things in the USA, for example, people have a lot of trouble with letting go of, they hate old age, for example. Everybody wants to stay young forever in the USA, and they also hate death as well. Because death is sort of seen as some kind of failure, I suppose, in life, failure of the American dream somehow. You're no longer participating in this great American dream and great American pleasure seeking enterprise if you're dead or dying. So people that have a terminal illness, and people that are dying, old people, people that have some kind of loss of libido or loss of consciousness or loss of brain function in any way, I would almost venture to say that in the USA, certainly until the last 5 years or so, have almost been second-class citizens, really, and almost sort of, depicted as kind of social failures, as it were. So it's a cult of youth that dominates the USA at the moment. Whether or not that will always be the same, and that probably depends on Black American culture coming to the ascendancy, or Latino culture coming to the ascendancy, because they might have a different view of old age and might respect it more, and might not assign old people to such second-class status as white Caucasians do. But it's a complicated cultural sort of discussion, that. So I hope that I've shown that the Church of Nowhere It does have something positive to say in the view of, in the face of death. Death is an opportunity really to let go of everything, and you're practicing that letting go in your daily meditation. So that's really the point that the Church of Nowhere wants to make, and even the Church of Nothing. But because in death you go nowhere, if you like, in a way, as the church itself is nowhere to be found, and so there after death you are nowhere to be found. But that's okay, in that you can make a dying a beautiful thing, rather than a terrible thing, rather than a fearful thing. And as we know, people are greedy for life and fearful of death, and this makes people, kill other people or make the quality of life of other people bad, because they are frightened of death and frightened of losing things, frightened of loss itself. So we see that greed and fear are what operates in the world of commerce, for example, in the world of multinational economic strategy, for example, is based on greed and fear, which is based on a realization that you can't take it with you. You've got to grab while you can because you're going to die, and not be able to take any of this fabulous wealth with you. But the Church of Nowhere has this kind of ascetic, if you like, which is based on meditation, which is based on a letting go of things, rather than a holding on to them, which only leads us into fear and greed and avarice and aggression. So you don't need a metaphysics. You don't need an intervening God, or deity, to help you through death. If you practice meditation, you can do this yourself, for yourself, without the need for any metaphysics. Thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.